Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I just grabbed this just in case because Amanda's gone now, so we're on our own.
Oh, okay.
So we should run that and get that going because
Yeah.
there's no one here.
All set? We all set? All right. All right. My name is Chris Gallagher. I'm the town engineer. We wanted to get a group of people together, so I thank everybody for coming out. I know time is important. One of the things the thing we're going to discuss tonight is the traffic around the Common and the Rotary, and some of the surrounding streets that run into and out of the Common. So, a quick history. Certain people have been looking at the traffic on the Common for quite some time. So this past spring, we brought a plan before the Board of Selectmen that Par Engineering has done to address some of the current concerns that we've heard over the years, that the town has heard over the years through Planning Board, DPW, Board of Selectmen, and other avenues that people have made their concerns heard. We have issues with how people move around the Common, using the inside lane, using the outside lane, exiting from the inside lane. We also have issues with the approaches onto the Common. In particular, the Main Street stretch of road that comes into the Common every afternoon gets backed up almost to Dairy Queen. So we have, with PAR's help, gone through a fairly comprehensive study on how to address as many of those concerns as we can. We came to the Board of Selectmen last spring, and one of the first things we heard was, have you put this out there to the public? Have you talked to the business owners? Have you talked to the residents? Have you given people a chance to look at it and give their input on how it will actually function with the designs that we've put on the piece of paper? So that's where we stand right now. This is the opportunity to present the design features that PAR has done, get some input. There was a survey put out. We have, a handful of comments, a couple handfuls of comments that we've received through that survey by email that we've gone through, we've read, and we may run through tonight once Tim does his presentation. So with that, I will bring up Tim Thompson with PAR Engineering, who has done the design. We'll walk through the features of the design project and where we intend to go with that.
Thank you, Chris. So good evening, everyone. As Chris mentioned, my name is Tim Thompson. I'm a traffic engineer with PAR Corporation. So we've been working with the town over the last few months, assessing some traffic improvements that can be implemented throughout the Common. So tonight I'm just going to go through quickly what we have studied to date. I'm going to go through some of the items in the study that we prepared for the town, and then ultimately provide our recommendation. So just to run through some existing conditions, I'm sure you're all extremely familiar with the Common, but the Common's formed by the convergence of 7 roadways. They form a rotary-style layout that consists primarily of 2 circulating travel lanes. There's landscape space in the center of the Common itself. There's both angled and parallel parking that surrounds the Common. There are multiple pedestrian crosswalks. There are sidewalks throughout the Common. So it's an area that serves quite a heavy volume of vehicular traffic, but it also serves pedestrians with the neighboring businesses and the associated parking. So it's an area that sees a variety of users. Just to present an aerial, and just to orient you, this is kind of going to be the orientation of the Common throughout this presentation. So this is the Main Street approach up here to the north, Central Street down here, Acid and Mechanic up here. So we're just going to kind of keep this orientation throughout this presentation. So I first just want to go over some of the traffic observations that we've noticed through our study of the Common. And I'm sure you all are very familiar with these. These will resonate with you as well. But as Chris mentioned, the southbound approach to the Common from Main Street is the approach that experiences the most recurrent congestion. Generally, in the afternoon, the queue reaches about 2,000 feet, sometimes more than that. We've actually gone out, we've timed how long it takes to get from the back of the queue into the commons. It's about 4 or 5 minutes of delay that a vehicle experiences approaching the common in that direction on a daily basis. Mechanic Street also experiences some recurrent congestion, much less than what is experienced on Main Street. Typically, we see a maximum queue of about 20 to 25 vehicles during the PM peak. And then Central Street as well experiences some congestion, even a little bit less than that, in the range of about 10 to 15 vehicles during the PM peak. Another thing that Chris noted, we've noticed that drivers tend to use the outer lane of the common quite a bit. The inner lane is extremely underutilized, and really the reason for that is it's the entry movements and exit movements from the common are really only accessible to and from that outer lane. So people are really only using that inner lane to access parking or perhaps pass a vehicle as they're circulating through the common. So that outer lane is really the lane that's getting the most use. We've also noticed the lack of turn signal usage when people are exiting the common. A lot of times when a vehicle is approaching the common and trying to enter a gap into traffic, if somebody's using their turn signal indicating that they're making that right turn, and there's a gap for that vehicle to enter into the stream of traffic on the common, that can be missed with the lack of turn signal use. Also, driver behavior can be aggressive throughout the common. An area that experiences recurrent congestion, drivers are typically willing to accept narrower gaps in traffic to help alleviate some of that delay that they're experiencing. We've also noticed that vehicles can tend to travel at higher speeds through the common as well. We've conducted an extent of data collection as part of this project. We did traffic counts at each of the study intersections throughout the common back in May. We did those on a typical weekday morning peak hour from 7 to 9, evening peak hour from 4 to 6. We also did 48-hour continuous counts on a number of roadways that surround the common, including Market Street, Baker Street, and Railroad Street. We also collected crash data and reviewed crash data for a most recent 3-year period from 2016 through 2019. I'm just going to go over some of the trends that we did notice throughout that crash data. The most common trend that we saw was a rear-end collision on Main Street approaching the common. This is an area that experiences recurrent congestion. There's a lot of stop-and-go traffic. That type of nature of traffic movement lends itself to rear-end collisions, so that wasn't really a surprise for us. We also noted a couple of rear-end collisions within the common that specifically took place when a pedestrian was crossing. So there was a pedestrian that was within the crosswalk, a vehicle that was approaching stepped on their brakes, and the vehicle behind them was not able to stop in time. We also noticed some side swipe collisions, particularly exiting the common from the inner lane. So most notably, this happened on 3 occasions throughout that 3-year period for the exit from School Street onto Central. We also noticed it from South Street onto Mechanic, too. Also, a couple of recurrences of run stop signs. Most notably, this happened a couple times at Cohasset and Mechanic. There's also 2 bicycle collisions. There are no formal bike lanes throughout the common. I also should note, too, that there were no pedestrian collisions within that 3-year period that we looked at least based on the data that we received. So given what we've observed through our assessment of the common, knowing what we have for congestion problems, specifically with the approach from Main Street and also Mechanic and Central as well, some of the problems with vehicles or drivers not using their turn signal, some issues associated with drivers not utilizing the rotary configuration to its fullest extent and utilizing that middle lane. We've come up with a set of proposed geometric improvements, and these improvements have been set up to be implemented on a trial basis. So what you'll see here with the design that's behind me is this is using traffic barrels, temporary signage, temporary striping to implement these changes on a trial basis. So I'm going to kind of walk through what the proposed modifications are, starting at the Main Street intersection. I have a little bit of a close-up view here. So what's being proposed here is creating an island that is going to be occupying the outer lane of the common at the Main Street approach. And what this is going to do is force traffic that is continuing through the common to utilize this inner lane. Any traffic that's wishing to exit north onto Main Street is going to be using the right lane. Now what this is going to enable traffic on Main Street to do is to have essentially a free movement into the common. So by eliminating this yield condition and allowing vehicles to travel through into this outer lane of the common, we're really reducing the amount of conflict for a vehicle coming through on Main Street and reducing the amount of delay associated with that vehicle approach. Now the other thing I want to note here is to accommodate this configuration, it's proposed that Rock Hill Street be converted to one-way with traffic entering the common only. Now this is required to prevent somebody that's continuing to School Street to cut in front of traffic that's entering from Main Street to enter Rock Hill. So that's the reasoning behind making that conversion to one-way. Now Bird Street is also under this initial condition that was assessed, proposed to be one-way to eliminate traffic entering the common, and it would be allowed for a vehicle to make a movement exiting the common only onto Bird Street. Moving down to the South Street approach, similarly, we'd be looking to install an island type of configuration that, again, traffic that is wishing to continue through the common would be forced into the left turn lane, while vehicles that are looking to either exit onto South Street or Central would be forced to be utilizing the outer lane to continue through that movement.
Tim, if I may just clarify.
Yep.
Tonight, we're only proposing the one at Main Street, but you are walking through everything
Exactly.
for the benefit of everybody here.
Correct. So I'm kind of walking through the steps of the study as we conducted it, and I'll ultimately get to what is being recommended at this moment. So then up the intersection with Mechanic Street and Cohasset, again, similarly looking to introduce this temporary island, again, trying to get vehicles to use that inner lane and reserving that outer lane for exiting movements onto Mechanic Street and Cohasset. So we take a look at those improvements, and what we did was called a capacity analysis. So essentially, we modeled the intersection as it is currently. We calibrated it based on existing conditions. We projected traffic volumes out into the future, and then we conducted an assessment of what we call the future build condition, which is really the future condition with these proposed changes in place. So capacity analysis, we're really looking at the amount of delay a vehicle experiences as they enter into the common. So when we took a look at the capacity analysis, I'm just going to run through what we ultimately determined. So as I mentioned, for the approach from Main Street, we're essentially allowing that movement from Main Street into the common to be a free right turn movement. And what our analysis was able to show was that that's going to significantly decrease the amount of delay associated with that movement. It essentially brings that queue length that's up around 2,000 plus feet down to several hundred feet, and really improves and reduces the amount of delay for that approach. As I mentioned, what was originally proposed was the conversion of Bird Street to one-way away from the common. And what our analysis was able to show was that, and what we anticipated was that vehicles would use Mechanic Street as opposed to Bird Street to enter the common. Now we know that Mechanic Street currently experiences some congestion, and really what our model showed was that additional traffic from Bird Street that was being put onto Mechanic Street really significantly increased delay on Mechanic Street. Final conclusion, the proposed geometric improvements at School Street, South Street, and Central Street really had a minor impact on vehicle delay. As I mentioned, that's an area that experiences some congestion, but really not excess delay is what I would consider. So given what the results of our analysis showed, we've developed a set of recommendations with the town. So what we're recommending is progressive implementation of a trial to implement improvements throughout the common. Now what I mean by that is I showed 3 locations for introducing some of those islands to help improve traffic flow. And really, we feel like introducing those improvements at all 3 locations is really going to be, it could be a little bit difficult to handle all at once. What we're proposing is actually just focusing on one to start, testing that out, seeing how it operates, and then implementing the other 2 upon the successful implementation of the first trial. So the location that we're proposing to start this trial implementation is at the Main Street approach to the common. And the reasons behind this are, as I mentioned, it has the most potential benefit, the most potential to reduce delay for vehicles approaching the common. It also provides the longest weave section, and I didn't talk about this in too much detail yet, but the stretch from Rock Hill Street to South Street is the longest stretch of straight roadway throughout the common. So it's going to provide the most amount of distance for vehicles to make a move from that inner lane into that outer lane to be able to make an exit onto the next departure from the common. So that's something important to note as far as that approach as well. As I mentioned, we looked at converting Burt Street to one-way, and that traffic would be moved to Mechanic Street. However, given what the impact to Mechanic Street would be, we are proposing to leave Bird Street as two-way as it is currently. And also, with this trial implementation, we want to encourage that this traffic be monitored closely, in particular that weaving maneuver, to see how drivers react to this configuration, and make sure that we in the town are on top of any impacts that might be unforeseen.
Does Bird Street go now has to be forced down 140? Main Street and north, sorry, I mean south. Like Bird Street can't go into the inside lane, they have to go down 140 to come out of Bird Street now?
No, it's full access. You can access the inner lane.
Oh,
Yeah.
what? No, when you have the barrels, how are they gonna get over to the inside lane from Bird?
So this,
That's Bird.
Yep, that's Bird, so you're just able, the barrels end here, so you have about 100 feet to make this move. It's, you have clear line of sight down that leg of the common. So it's crossing 2 lanes of traffic, it's not.
Did we talk to the hardware store there too? Because I already see people cut through there. Have we talked to them
Yeah.
specifically?
And how's a bus supposed to do that?
There's turning, it's essentially a straight movement down Bird Street here. There's very
Right, but you
little
have
turning.
2 lanes of traffic coming.
Yeah, there's an island.
Perhaps the police could be of assistance with that.
Well,
I mean, that's what we're trying to test this out. It might be difficult, but.
I was just making sure, I was thinking it's only 100 feet that you're trying to get people to, because there's already an island there. You know there's already an island.
Yeah, that island's shown up here. So
Okay,
a vehicle which is currently stopping here
yeah.
is able to make this
So
move
my
even a
suggestion
larger
is maybe
vehicle
we
like a
make
bus.
that go right on to 140. What's the liability to the town if someone gets in a bad accident with these changes?
Well, this
right
is,
away?
this is a trial.
Yeah,
and it's
I know,
only
but
gonna
I'm
be
just
barrels,
saying
So
what's
worst
the-
case scenario, if someone gets a barrel, and we say, okay, this isn't gonna work, we need to modify this.
Right, but I'm just, all right, I was just making sure, I was thinking, that's only like 100 feet.
Yeah, no, it's enough
Okay.
room for even a larger vehicle to make that
Yeah,
movement into the
yeah.
inner lane.
And there's a crosswalk there, right?
Because the arrow's pointing that you have to turn. That's why I'm confused, because if you're saying they can cross over, that's not what the arrow's saying. That's why I was wondering.
Yeah, so I mean, this arrow is for a vehicle that's circulating from
But the people on
beyond
Bird
north of
Street
Bird.
aren't gonna know that if it's painted on the ground, right? Am I looking at that right?
You're right.
No, it seems like an awkward move.
Yeah.
Yeah. because isn't that why you took out Rock Hill, made it that way so that somebody couldn't do that from the common? So now you're gonna let somebody do it up there?
Well, so it's similar. Imagine a vehicle that's crossing 2 lanes of traffic to just continue straight. They still have to judge traffic approaching from 2 oncoming lanes to
But
make
they-
that movement past it.
But right now, Bird Street goes in the outside lane, and then they have time to move to the
Right.
inside lane if they need to.
Yeah.
And it's hard to.
But they
do that
don't now. You have to go.
But if they're going around the common
Yeah,
today, as you come up Bird Street, you're
Right.
gonna make that cross over to the other side as you proceed.
but they don't do it
So
right
that's
there.
really
They-
not gonna be any change from the way it is right now.
Except there's barrels in the way, so they can't.
What's that?
They want them to go immediately to the inside lane, or you have to go down 140. You can't.
That's right. That's fine.
The individual that's turning from Bird Street just needs to, they need to find a gap in both approaching lanes of traffic.
And
I-
go straight across it?
Can I just,
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
I live on Baker. I use Bird all the time. I drive a school bus.
Right.
So
Oh,
let me
yeah.
answer some questions.
Yeah.
First of all, you might need to just adjust the island a little bit, first of all, but it absolutely is doable. I can
Okay.
drive a bus out of there and go to the inside of the common without a problem. I've done it now, so that's not an issue. But to make Bird Street only accessible to go in is a
Right.
disaster.
Right, and that's not what's being.
If anything, I would just shut down Rock Hill and take that stretch in there with all of the proposed development that will be taking place. I mean, you've got nothing but the theater, a church, and what you're going to propose. Turn that into a walking area.
Don't forget us.
On the way home,
Well, no, I mean, you've got access Market Street from
All right, then-
Granite or from South Street.
Really,
In-
we've got to
in-
do something.
so if I'm coming from the other direction, and this weave pattern that you've described, so all traffic for South Street needs to weave.
Mhm.
I need to weave every day, because that's the only way into Market Street. So I'm blocked from entering the way I normally enter, Rock Hill. So have you done a traffic study of the number of cars that need to weave? Because you can't weave now. That's why everyone's in the outside lane.
Right.
There's no weaving. I drive it every day. I live in the center of town. So what I'm envisioning is coming up, getting halfway down school in the weave pattern, unable to weave. The traffic's just gonna back up completely. And that's where the clog is gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll experience it every day.
I wouldn't even want to enter from the common, or to me, if I lived over there, and I grew up on Granite, but I mean, if I lived over there, I would go down Granite Street and come in from that end of Market, or I would go in from South Street on Market Street. I would avoid the common at all costs.
And how would I do that if I was coming home from Mansfield?
You'd stay.
Take
Liberty
a
Street
left on
Market.
Liberty.
All the way around
I wouldn't
town?
even go to the common. I'd take a left on Liberty and cut right
That's
across,
right, so would I.
which is what,
That's what I do now.
Right.
I mean, I'd take a left on Liberty with the school bus
Okay,
to go to
thanks for
high
the
school.
suggestion. I mean, I also
Yeah.
know that route. I do it every day, but if I'm coming up Mechanic Street, which I do 70% of my travel, that's where I'm returning from.
I continue
I
down and go
need-
down South Street.
I think the key
And
thing is,
experience the weave pattern
Right.
along
You
with
can't get over.
how many other cars? I think it's a bottleneck.
I think the key thing at that intersection is people coming up Bird. There are only a few cars, but nobody knows whether they're going right or left. And that is the biggest cause of delays, in my opinion, and I think it's supported by all the traffic studies, of Main Street, because that trouble, they don't know. This way, they swing off and they're going around, wonderful. And if you can't go to Rock Hill,
I don't know.
that eliminates the question, I've got to cut you off at the head of the street. And so I think it's a
Take a right
fantastic,
on Main and a left on Granite.
that's right, I agree with you.
Well, then you're
Yeah.
forcing the
Just
traffic through
shut
neighborhoods.
down
But I
Rock
will
Hill.
say, Market Street now will have more traffic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right, on that narrow unpaved road. you know, coming up that way, because now people can't go the way they used to go.
Does
Yeah, but there
anybody
won't be
in
that
town-
much.
Does anybody in town
What?
here remember that Centennial
Really? We're
used to
building
go
a
to the common?
15-unit apartment building, and we have a restaurant coming in.
Remember
It's only the
Centennial
time
used
from
to go to
Grand
the
Street and
common?
from
Market's
Bacon.
good, we said
All
Centennial.
right, I just like
Go
to,
to the common, that's
Can we-
the First Baptist Church.
Pat,
Yes.
all right, we've got to take control of this, because there's 6 conversations going on, and neither Tim, Paige, myself, the police chief can actually hear what the comments are being made. Okay, what we have to remember that this is a trial, okay? We can only take it so far on paper before we have to put it into practice and actually see how it works. We know that weave is a short weave. That's why we're focusing on one piece at a time. You know, those 2 pieces down at the bottom of the common, at South and Cocasset, we're gonna do those at a future date, because that weave between Central Street and Cocasset Street is much shorter. So we saw that movement and we said, we can't do that right now. We're focusing on one thing at a time. We do wanna look at the entire common. We wanna get opinions on the entire common. We have quite a few in writing. And you know, the purpose of having people here tonight is so that we can hear those comments and those concerns. We would like to hear them, but we can't hear 6 at a time. Okay? So I'd like to give the police chief a moment to speak if he'd so like, which I think he does.
Real map. Just the
Are there more recommendations before we move on, though? Or is
That
that
was-
the end of that? Okay.
I just want to point out one system that actually has been implemented that is not in theory, is that we were tasked with dealing with everybody leaving Gillette Stadium and they're at the end of the games, and 140 was a point of exit. So we realized that even at the end of the game, 140 backed all the way up to Dairy Queen and backed almost up to Stop and Shop because of the rotary. That was our problem. So when people are stuck in traffic, their behaviors change drastically when they're not moving. So what we did is, that we did not have an engineer come out, but we got very creative, and we parked the police car stopping the outside lane of traffic. So anybody coming around the rotary had to move to the inside lane, because the police car was there with 2 officers. And it instantly alleviated 140 completely. The speed limit on the rotary is 20 miles an hour. And I think town-wide, we've been dealing with Baker Street, Granite Street, all the side streets are being inundated because 140 does not move. This, as Chris says, it's just a trial. It's not ripping the roads up, changing the curves. It's just give it a shot. I don't have the numbers, and you probably pulled them off the Mass Highway, all the accident reports that are reported.
We got them from your department.
Yes, you did. We report them online, so they're all there. Our accident window right here is pretty small, if not non-existent. But this problem here at commuter time is busy because people are coming down Baker Street. They're cutting across Railroad Ave. They think Bird Street's a cut through. If 140 is flowing, Mechanic Street will then flow as well. So I know everybody has concerns, absolutely. But this does work. We've seen it. We see it on every game day. That's one of our mandatory traffic posts, 140 flows. We haven't had an accident there. Maybe there's a police car there, and they're coming in at 20 miles an hour. And we do talk about the weave. If people are coming in at 20 miles an hour and they're using their signals, and they haven't been waiting 9 minutes or maybe 5 minutes in traffic, their disposition as a driver, because they're moving, they're more courteous because they've been moving. But when you've been sitting and you're trying to get home at the end of the night, and you have to go pick up your kids, and you're looking at the same problem every single day, and it's not getting better, this is a good try. It's a good try, and they've done a lot of work. I said we just give it a shot.
All right, how much do you have to go, how much room do you have to try to turn into like Judy's Flowers? From the last variant.
You can't go down there anymore.
You can't go to Judy's anymore?
No.
Yeah,
They
you
got
can.
on top.
Into the park.
So actually, hold on,
Yeah,
actually,
like,
my wife has a business in here. So she's given up on the outside lane. So she comes around the inside, she puts a directional on,
Right.
and she's able to get in. Do you have to apply your brakes? Do you have to put your signal on? Do you have to wait for someone to be courteous? Yes.
Right, so.
But we're not getting car accidents there. We're not.
Right,
because of it.
but now you're gonna have everybody on the inside lane. except 140.
Well, you're
Main.
gonna, yeah, you are gonna have,
Right.
exactly. It's
So
gonna
the
be
other,
forward.
every other entrance is now gonna be on the inside lane, right? If you come in from Central Street,
Yep.
Cohasset Street, Mechanic Street,
Yeah.
you're gonna be on the inside lane trying to get to Judy's or to the bank or to South Street or to
So
140.
you come around the road and put your directional and move to the right lane.
Right, but where's the barrel in?
Right. I think it's, what is it, around the corner?
Right around the corner, right around there?
Back.
So,
It backs up even more.
and the other thing, I know it works for Sunday, which is great, but you're gonna have school buses and you're gonna have 16, 17, and 18-year-old drivers trying to do this.
Okay, well,
At-
number one,
at the
Which
peak
is,
hours.
which is why we're doing it
Yeah.
in the fall and not over the summer. Because if you do it in the summer without school buses,
Right.
without the regular commuting traffic, you don't get a true picture of what that looks like, which is why we came late in the spring. It wasn't right to do it in the spring. We wanted to make sure we got it out to the public, which is why we didn't push it over the summer either. We wanted to make sure that we got that commuting traffic. We wanted to make sure that we got the school buses to see how this actually works throughout the bulk of the year.
Chris, how does the traffic react with the barrels in place? I mean, your experience has been, does it slow people down typically?
Yeah, I think generally when people see the barrels, they know they're entering into, well, typically a construction zone, but, they provide an indication that it's, people should slow down as they enter that area.
And we do have message boards that we will deploy in advance of the common that's, specifically state new traffic pattern in place, drive with caution, something to that extent, so that people, before they actually get to these movements, are aware that something's different, which is the biggest thing in the trial, to make people aware, give them a couple weeks to get used to it, and then it's really that third and fourth week that actually lets you see how it's going to function. The first week, people are just trying to get used to it. It's really that third and fourth week that you're going to see the true movements and how people actually react to those features and that design. Leah.
So I think it's great that the trial, we can, pull it if it doesn't work or readjust, and I like how we're just doing one piece of it right now. For pedestrian safety, it can be a little bit tough right now. Do we have any concerns, or do we need to think about temporarily shutting down that crosswalk while people are weaving over and getting used to that pattern and maybe looking over their shoulder, or do we feel like that crosswalk is still safe?
The one by going
The one-
towards the library?
The one in front of Judy's, kind
Oh,
of.
by Judy.
Not
Yeah.
Judy's, how about the other one?
Personally, I don't
Barrels
think it's
now.
safe at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we know that this is going to be the location of that week that's going to be occurring at that crosswalk. I think long-term, if this, if this geometric configuration goes in place, that's a candidate for receiving some type of pedestrian flasher or some other striping, some additional signage, something else to alert drivers that that's the crossing
Because I think the
location.
one by Bird Street works.
Yeah, and what I see, so I have young kids, and, when they go to camp uptown, they all walk uptown, and, I might drive around and creep while they're all going up there, just to make sure everyone's safe. But the crosswalks with the islands in particular, I see a lot of those kind of agitated drivers that will see someone, and because there is that island, they'll kind of blast through because they figure they have to like stop again at the middle of the island. So, just if we can keep the crosswalks and how the patterns change things, because we are such a different rotary that, yeah, there's a lot of traffic going around, but then we also have this other pedestrian factor with the theater and with, kids uptown, so just if we need to shut one down, I'd rather see it shut down while people are getting used to it than people looking over their shoulders to weave and, having so much else to focus on and not focusing on the crosswalk. Because there is no flasher.
Because I was thinking the one on Main Street where the pedestrians are now going to be blocked by barrels with people coming down Common. Those, right there, they're going to be not seen.
Yeah, I mean,
If they're trying to look at the barrels,
Right.
it's just
That's why
another
you-
thing, they're
that's
not
why
going to be
you-
seen right there. Maybe shut that one.
yeah, I mean, I don't think that a barrel's going to completely block a pedestrian. And I think another thing to consider here too is this is actually shortening the crossing distance for a pedestrian, so they're actually going to be a little bit less exposed to traffic.
No, I just mean when we first started, maybe not have that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some additional crossing signage could be incorporated in these locations.
I see what happens when
Temporary.
people try to cross there now, and it's crazy for them, but yeah.
Call on Linda.
Hi, I just have a question. I just want to confirm. So the one-way on Rock Hill is just from the four-way stop up to the Common? Or
Correct.
the entire,
Yes.
okay,
It'll be
not
from
the entire length of
right,
Rock?
it'll be from Market Street to the Common.
Okay.
That'll be the one-way.
While you're discussing crosswalks, the worst one is the one right as you come off Mechanic Street. And I've had cops tell me that. You come off of Mechanic Street and you're looking to your left on Cohasset, you're looking straight ahead, you're looking in two directions for cars, and you come around and you start to go, and it should have stayed in the center of that stretch. Never should have been moved to where it is. It's the most unsafe crosswalk on that
Yeah,
common.
it should be.
So
I have to say,
Yeah.
along with the most unsafe is the one coming out of Central. I run the
Central,
farmers,
yeah.
I run the farmers market.
Yep.
And people are doing exactly that. They're looking to the left, they see there's no car coming, and they go, but people are in the crosswalk. And that's the main crosswalk during the farmers market, which is every Thursday night between 4 and 6, which is the highest traffic time. And people trying to cross to get to South Street to get their pizza to then come back to the Common, or to use that parking lot that's behind South Street and then walk that little alley and cross back over to come to the farmer's market.
So maybe if
That
we could
one's
just keep an
distance.
eye to the crosswalks, obviously there's a lot going on, but
Yeah.
keep that in mind.
I should also note that we have been in discussions with the town about taking a closer look at these crossing locations and safety improvements there as well as part of kind of the next phase of this project.
Yeah, whether this worked or not, moving that and getting rid of.
And it come over here behind
Yeah,
you.
so the only other concern I'd have, I mean, besides the crosswalks and adding maybe flashers or controlling the speed during this whole transition is, I think a lot of people still like to exit from the inside lane onto Central Street. And now forcing 2 lanes full of traffic without having any painted arrows at the Central Street, South Street area.
There actually are painted arrows there, because
there are.
someone almost killed me, and I think that they think they're down the Cape and it's 2 in and 2 out, you
I
know?
mean, it's been a long time since,
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
when
there.
I was
I checked
younger, that was
some, yeah.
you did that, I mean, that was all you did, but
Okay.
just get concerned about that.
Because you're not gonna have those barrels.
I think I was.
Right?
Correct. Under this first initial phase, those will not be, these barrels will not be there.
Right.
You're right.
Well, Heather.
I just had a question, and maybe I missed it. When Rock Hill becomes the one-way, how much impact is that gonna have on like Granite, Market, and Union? A lot or not, I mean, I might have missed it.
It's really quite minor. Of all the approaches to the Common, Rock Hill has a really, really low volume. I think we're at about 20 vehicles per hour that move in that one direction. So those vehicles being dispersed throughout that neighborhood is really going to have a minor impact.
Steve was next. Go ahead.
So the traffic coming from Mechanic Street northbound, as it passes Bird Street, do we know what percentage of cars actually go up Main Street and how many continue around the Common?
We do not. We have counts at each of these locations, but origin, destination, so how many go from Bird Street to South Street or Central, that information we don't have.
You mean
A
when you
study
pass
about
off?
5 years ago, it was about 50/50.
50/50. So now,
That's not an exact number,
so
but
now,
it's fine.
just for future, when we start doing the other, you're gonna have 50% of the cars coming on the inside lane. 90% of that 50% is either gonna go down South Street or continue down Central Street. So they all have to weave to the outside. So I think there's gonna have to be more with that crosswalk than just lights. Maybe something like, and I hate them as much as anyone else, but a raised platform.
No, the people
To
that
slow
are
the
going
traffic
down
down.
Central Street will stay on the inside till they get to the point where they do the split to go, make the sharp left to go across.
They all have to weave to the outside.
Yeah, no, they
By
can't.
Bank of
No,
America.
there's provision there. You can be on the inside lane, I do it all the time, that's my normal passage. Stay on the inside lane till I get there, and when it comes to the split down at the bottom, just continue ahead. That's a dashed line, that's perfectly legit.
But there's an arrow there that you have to continue in, so
Right,
that's
now you
causing a
can't.
problem.
What's that?
There's an arrow there, the outer lane has an arrow for straight and central, and the inner lane has an arrow only for straight, so cars should not be doing that.
Right.
So you're trying to time it from the inside to shoot across?
What's that?
You're trying to time it, to
No,
make sure no
I'm
one's
saying
on
the
your...
way it is set up today,
Is that true?
that inside lane has a right to split, either go left,
No.
around,
That
the base of the
that was.
line,
It
or
was.
straight ahead.
But now it's
Now
painted
it's
different.
just.
No, it's not
That's what
painted.
he
Painted.
Right.
We're talking amongst each other again. So let's try and keep it.
So basically what I was trying to say is, you're gonna have a lot of traffic that they have to weave. And the biggest problem I see around the common is people go too fast. And it's probably from what you were saying, Chief, that people are agitated. When I come around and I have to weave to go down South Street, I try to, if someone's equal with me, I let them go and I weave behind them. But if I'm ahead of someone, then I'm gonna go and I'm gonna take it. And what happens is, they finally get a break and they punch it. So now I'm halfway down by Bank of America and the guy's racing me on the right side lane. So I think that's the biggest problem, is the speed. So controlling speed is the key to this.
So we will, as we implement this, we're gonna work with Chris and his team and have officers present and assigned up there just to monitor.
Well, we can't have officers all the time.
We can't.
Right.
And no matter what traffic pattern we design, we're not gonna be able to change some of those behaviors, because if we get someone who's an aggressive driver.
I think everybody is in agreement that free flow from Maine onto the common is. I don't think anyone's here in disagreement of that, are they? I mean, we can all agree on that.
But.
I'm gonna go with Jim.
Behind me?
Yep, Jim.
Just a couple comments, and God bless you, Chris and Tim. This is not an easy thing. So the common is very unusual because you got 7 connection points. And everything that comes into the common or out of the common is 1 lane, but you've got a common and a rotary that's 2 lanes. Did you look at the possibility of making it 1 lane throughout rather than, because all I'm hearing is the weaving and the queuing because someone's coming down 140 looking to the left and you've got 2 lanes, you don't know if someone's gonna cut from the inner lane out, which happens every day, all the time. If you're messing, so in effect, what Chief is saying is he put a barrel there and the problem went away during that rush when people were coming away from going north to south. If you can put the barrels in and you can make it 1 way, could you look at a scenario where it's 1 lane? And that way the main course for the 140 stays fluid. And then maybe you put stop signs at the other ones. You look at the level of, I read the report, if you look at the level of service of some of the other lanes coming in, you've got level of service A. And to your point, if you look at Rock Hill, you got very few cars. So if there's a stop sign there and there's a wait, it's not going to affect much. A little concerned that when you did the study, there wasn't any looking at, there's a theater event in the church that was done at off hours or whatever, but there is more traffic than what you're saying if you look at a 400-seat theater. And the other thing is, if you look at the study, you looked at the level of service pre and post of the intersections, but you didn't look at what that effect is going to have. If you put 1 way in front of the theater on Rock Hill, it's forcing people to, you can't do it 2 and 3 roads earlier because that's already closed off during rush hour. You bring them down 1 road, there's going to be a lot of traffic coming down that side street, or you're going to continue south past Rock Hill, you're going to take a right on south, you're going to come back on Market, which is an atrocious road for the last year or 2, and then what about those neighbors? So some recognition that one problem is solved, but you're creating a potential other problem, and you don't know until you put the barrels up. I would have liked to see in the study some recognition that there are people around the common other than the people that pass through it.
So, to respond to both of those, we did redistribute traffic that currently turns onto Rock Hill. We did redistribute that around to South Street and around through this neighborhood. So again, that volume is really, really small, so it's not, from a capacity standpoint, having a significant impact down here on Market. Your first comment about looking at the rotary as a single lane, we actually got involved in looking at the common about 2 years ago, and we had taken a look at a proposed improvement plan that was developed by another consultant that actually it did look at what would happen if School Street here was 1 lane and we had a yield control here for Main Street, single lane converging together, and this stretch of School Street was 1 lane. And it couldn't handle it. The capacity, it's just too much traffic getting funneled into that 1 single lane. It was resulting in queues that were farther than what are experienced today. So that has been something that's been considered in the past.
But having 1 lane all the way around, not just in a segment, right? So
right, but I mean, this is the most constricting point of the common from a capacity So this is our worst case scenario, if you will. So if we were to have, if this doesn't work as one lane, the rest of the common is not going to get any better as well.
So you're saying in front of where Bank of America is, it's restricted because people can't go past Bank of America? Where's the backup? What's constricting it? Is it 'cause
In the previous assessment that we did, the restriction was this: you have one lane coming here, one lane coming here. The one lane coming from Main Street is yield control, so the backup is up Main Street, very similar to what you have today, actually even worse under that condition.
And I'd just like to comment on the giving consideration to the neighbors that abut the common. One of the things that we do expect with this improvement would be that traffic, sorry, I'll stand so that traffic that is using Baker Street should stay on 140, should stay on Main Street now. If they're not sitting waiting 5 minutes to get onto the common, they don't have to turn down Garfield to use Baker Street, to come back up to Bird Street or to get over to Mechanic Street. So there was consideration given to the neighbors. We have, as Tim said, looked at what that traffic looks like using Market Street to come up Rock Hill. And clearly, with a 400-seat event going on at the theater, you have 200 plus cars showing up. Some of those are going to just park on the common and walk. They're going to find somewhere else to park. There are people that are getting dropped off. There is that movement, but there's no parking on Rock Hill Street. There's no parking at the theater. It's on the common.
There is parking.
There is some parking on Rock Hill Street, correct. The majority of those cars, those vehicles are not going to use Rock Hill Street. They're not going to make that movement to Market Street to come up Rock Hill. They're going to find somewhere else to park, and they're going to walk over from those parking spaces. So we have given that consideration to some of the neighbors. We have looked at some of that movement. Again, it's a trial. We've got to put it in place, put it on the ground, so we can see how it actually functions. The design, the models are only going to take us so far before we can actually see what that looks like. Gordon.
I'd like to Jim's question about the single lane. The traffic counts that we have and the state guidelines for rotaries, 2 lane versus 1 lane, we do not exceed the traffic count for a single lane, so that it does meet the state standards if we only had the single lane.
I'm sorry, Gordon, what does that mean? We meet the state.
I'm sorry?
We meet the state standards for having 2 lanes, but
In
not
the guidelines for rotaries, they spell out based on the dimensions, et cetera, what you can take for traffic. And we do not exceed the single lane. Now, we still have lots of problems with the merging and all that, but frankly, the biggest concern that I have, that I hope we don't forget, is we're talking about people walking with the crosswalks to get to the new bistro or whatever to the Rodman Center. We've got, I don't want to see any child killed because we don't have the sidewalk along the common between Rock Hill and South Street, and then same on the other side. We need that 5 feet, even with the 5 foot, you still have 53 feet, which is enough for 2 lanes. But with only 1 lane, we still comply with the state's criteria for a road.
So I think that's what I was saying. You could do 1 lane.
Yes,
and meet the
comply with
requirements.
their standard.
Yep.
Is that a 24-hour standard or is that a per-hour traffic
Per hour.
standard?
Per hour.
So at our peak, we meet that standard?
What's that?
At peak traffic?
Yes.
So how many people get off on Main Street? Wouldn't that make Main Street worse with 1 lane?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's basically the gist
All
of
right,
it.
I'm
That's what the
just
previous study
Right.
that Tim was referencing
Is there a
showed.
yield for Main Street? Right now, but with this, will there be no yield? They can just come right on in?
They have free access to that outer lane.
So any pedestrian, they don't have to, well, unless they see them, they don't have to stop. They're just going to,
Well,
Yeah.
They're on
it's
their
state
own.
law to
trust
stop
me,
for-
they don't, right.
Crosswalk.
They don't stop now for anybody, but I'm just thinking, but they usually have a yield sign. Now they don't even have a yield or slow or,
Well, same as it is now.
right, well,
So we have a few questions. Since we did open it up to the public, I want to make sure, and that we are broadcasting this live, and we are recording it so that there's the full participation. I think maybe we should run through a few of the questions that we got online. Tim, I'll probably just read them to you and get your response, if you don't mind. So this person says, I think this is a bad idea for the following reasons. Cars are going to be stuck in the inner lane all the time with no opportunity to move over to exit, or they will just cut people off. People are going to get into accidents trying to get out of the outer lane when they realize the last second that the outer lane has to exit there. 3, making it easier for people at that entrance to enter without stopping will increase their speed and put pedestrians at even more risk than they already are. 4, increasing the number of cars traveling in the inner lane will make it much more difficult for people trying to back out of the inner parking spaces. And 5, everyone knows the basic rules of driving around a rotary, and still people manage to get confused. If one area of the rotary now has a different set of rules than the rest, this would only add more confusion. On the other hand, it will probably make people take an alternate route to avoid the rotary together, thus improving traffic flow, as was the case in the updated Middleborough Rotary. So Tim, do you have any response to any of these concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first two really focus around the weave, which, you know, we know people are going to have to weave. I think people will get used to the behavior or used to the action of having to perform that weave. As far as increasing their speeds, you know, I tend to agree with what the chief said about, you know, people that are, if you're progressing through a location without having to wait 5 minutes before you get to there, you're more likely to travel through at a reasonable rate. You know, one of the things that these barrels present, and you know, in a future scenario where there's a permanent installation, is some vertical element. And we know that anytime a vertical element is proposed next to an area where somebody's traveling, they're more likely to slow down. It's a natural traffic calming feature that the barrels present. Increasing the number of traveling cars in the inner lane. As far as the parking spaces in the center, I mean, there is space to be able to pull out of that parking space without encroaching into that inner circulating lane. So as long as somebody is paying attention to where the location of that lane is and making that movement safely, I think that movement from those inner parking spaces will pretty much be the same as it is today.
isn't that only on one side of the common that you have room? The other
No, it's all the way around.
side? There's enough room on the other side?
Yeah, they got a backup lane.
Yep, they can kind
Even
of
by
drive
the,
there.
even by the Rodman?
Yeah.
They have
Plenty
room
of
to
room.
back out?
Plenty of room.
Okay, next question. I have concerns about how easily someone will be able to move into the right-hand lane to exit at South Street during rush hour when there's a steady stream of cars coming from Main Street. Would this also result in more people exiting onto Commercial from the inside? I think that means Central, I think they mean, from the inside lane, which causes South to back up, since you can't merge if someone is in the inside lane, as is 50% of the time. They exit onto Central from the inside. Gordon, and potential for accidents in the rotary. So my concern is the negative impacts this would have on South Street travel. So I think you've kind of, it's more of the same.
We've talked about this movement quite a bit tonight.
Yep.
But to go back, I noticed at the beginning you had the backups for Main Street, Mechanic, Central, and I think South is one of the major arteries too, and I just noticed that one wasn't on there, so are we gonna look at that one, or is that not one of the main entrance points that we'll be monitoring?
I mean, we're going to be monitoring the whole common, but in particular, when I mentioned the approaches up front, it was really focusing on those that experience a lot of recurrent congestion, and we haven't seen that on South Street to the extent that we've seen on the other approaches.
Well, school let out.
Yeah,
because
it's-
usually the police officer there. Relieving the public.
Like, yeah.
Past Liberty. It's just, I mean, it's just past the.
Allison, did you have a comment?
I was just wondering, while you're monitoring the common during this, would you also be monitoring the increase of traffic on Market Street?
Yes.
Yeah, we're monitoring all.
Or even the side streets, because as a townie, I'll tell you, I'm probably going, it's going to be really hard to go in the inside lane to get to the outside lane, because 70% of the people want, you have 3 elementary schools, you have now both churches, 3 churches will have to have access that way. The town hall, Booth Playground is all South Street now. You're forcing everybody down to South Street. I'm gonna go down Main and cut through the neighborhood and come up Market that way. So it would be nice for somebody to check to see the impact on Granite and those other side streets, because I think they're gonna get more, especially if there's no longer a backup on 140, so now you can cross over easy. Usually you don't do that because there's such a backup on 140 heading back towards Dairy Queen, that people are gonna, instead of moving into Baker, they're gonna go that, it's the opposite way. They're gonna go those sides. Just monitor them, because it's not fair to them either. If people are just gonna.
Jim?
Yeah, so just to follow up, and that's what I was saying originally. In the traffic study, there was no level of service on any of those side streets that you studied. So you start putting out the barrels tomorrow, you've got no baseline analysis, so how are you going to make the comparison that you just said you were going to make?
I mean, we've done observations out there. We have a visual frame of reference for existing, but
I think you need to do traffic counts at least 4 intersections in that area. They're going to come down, because it may alleviate the common issue, but what are you going to say to the neighbor when their level of service goes from an A to a C, and there's no recourse for them because...
The study does cover that.
It does not cover that. There was no intersection studies on the outside neighborhoods that people would cut through, i.e. what they had talked about.
Oh, no, but there are at South Street.
All the intersections around the common.
Around the common.
But what this woman had just said is, all the people now coming to Market Street from South Street, to alleviate what Ms. Callahan had said, the townies will stay away, they're gonna go to the neighborhoods. You have no way of knowing how bad it is now until after the fact, right?
I mean, we have, like I said, we've done visual observations out there. We know that there's no real congestion on those minor side streets. So I think any buildup of traffic that occurs at those locations is something that we would be observing and making note of.
Well, I think what they're getting at is not traffic backup, but higher traffic count.
Yeah.
So it's not, there's never going to be 50 cars piled up down Market Street. Like, you're not going to go out there and see a traffic jam.
Right.
What they're saying is, how do you know if the traffic count has gone up significantly if you don't know what the traffic count is to start?
We do have traffic counts on Market Street.
Okay.
And level of service, I believe, has to do with delay, right? So if you don't have backup, you don't have a level of service issue. So that's, I think, what Tim's saying.
And that-
Right now, you're at a level of service A.
Yeah.
Because there's no congestion on these roads. So any deterioration would then be market, because right now it's performing fine, so.
That's
You go with Pat.
One of the comments was about stop signs and stuff. I think, in all honesty, I mean, people have to understand yield signs still mean you have to stop and yield. But the stop signs actually hold traffic up. Because especially if you're coming out of South Street, you've got clear view of traffic coming, and there are many times you could come out and you have plenty of time to go and fit in between. You come up and you have to completely stop, and it just stops everything, and you don't have that flow. And I think that we have spots around that common that you could change from a stop sign to a yield sign and keep that traffic flowing better too. I mean, you still gotta yield, you can't just go flying out, but, you know.
Gordon.
As part of the study time, my biggest fear is the lack of the sidewalk from the fire station down towards the back, along the side of the common, when they see people pushing their carriages behind the cars and that traffic. And I know the dimensions are there that it will fit. I would like to see, as part of the study to support it, if you could include barreling off or whatever, 5 foot of the parking lot on the diagonal parking to demonstrate that we can put that sidewalk in and let people walk to the crosswalks and a sidewalk rather than out in the traffic. And my biggest fear is to see a child
Just when
killed.
they're in the common?
On the outside.
No, on the outside.
He's talking about in front of the common.
Between the common and the fence.
Yeah,
Right now,
Yeah.
the curbing is a foot or two
Right.
from.
Yeah.
And we've got 53 foot 3 inches across that area in the narrowest point. And there's enough room to take 5 feet to make the walkway, so when a person comes in diagonally and is going to the pub that's about to be built at the fire station, they get out of their car, walk forward to a sidewalk, walk up to the crosswalk and then across, as compared to going across. And that's my biggest fear, is seeing somebody killed there, and I just don't want it to happen before I die. I know I'm getting old, I'm gonna die pretty fast, so maybe you don't have too much to worry about.
You're gonna be around for a long time. Will they lose that backup lane if you bump it out for the sidewalk?
You still have the backup, you still have the
Back
backup.
up a little?
Yeah. I think you may have to give, as I recall, you have to give up about a foot of it, but that's still enough to pull out and back, especially if you keep the serrated.
Yeah, it is surprising they didn't allow that when they put that in.
I know.
because You have to walk behind the vehicles.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just say too many close calls there, and I've been around town too long, that's all.
So online here, we actually had one person in favor of the proposal. Thank you very much. Another person concerned about speed, and so I would say, Gordon would attest to this, since I've been in town for about 4 years now, my big thing is declaring your intentions. How about we all use our blinker and we declare our intentions? So in addition to all of this great work, I say that we all slow down, we let people go, and we use our blinkers. And I've been trying to do that around town lately, like at Central Street, if you see the annoying Toyota Highlander stopped trying to let people go, because whenever I can, I've been trying to let people go. So I would just, my little PSA of, let's all be nicer to one another. I know it's hard when you're in a bad mood and you're late, and it doesn't feel, but let's all just try to use our blinkers and tell people where we're going. So this is a long one. I don't really want to read the whole thing. I think it's, the merging and the weaving, but I think one thing came up that we haven't really addressed in detail is the raised crosswalks. I know someone else mentioned that. What is the take on that? They even attest to DPW chiefs don't like them. But is there any provision that we could be making to slow down traffic? They actually reference 39 Pond Ave and Brookline as an example. Is that something that would work, or?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion on it is the common, especially, I mean, the circulating inner roadway for the most part is not something that is really conducive to speed humps. Just given the amount of traffic, the amount of vehicles actually have forced to slow down with the traffic volumes we have school buses going through there. Whenever you have speed humps, you run into DPW, snow clearing issues. You also, any emergency
Don't blame me.
response vehicles.
Don't blame me.
Just saying in general.
Blame Roger.
What about those painted ones that
3D?
It's an optical illusion?
I'd be slamming on my brakes.
I think those are amazing, that you actually look like, yeah,
Like that
exactly.
crosswalks coming out of the ground.
I just love to see the flashers at all the meetings.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're
think we
working
need
towards,
them,
is
yeah.
once we figure out what we're doing out here, because each one is what, about $3,500 to $4,000, I think, did
Yeah,
someone
they're
say?
close to 4,000.
Close to $4,000, I know.
That's per side.
Right, but still, that's a lot,
Let's do it.
But
it's a lot less than I
when
thought.
there's
So we
when there's
wanna make
11
sure- and there's
11
also
crosswalks up
probably-
there.
We reevaluate the crosswalks, we don't have 11
Yeah,
crosswalks.
Why do we need 11?
Some of them need to be changed.
No, and that is part of the next, part of what PAR is doing, part of what we were looking at is, where do the crosswalks make sense? Can we get rid of some of them? Can we move them? And how do we make them more visible? So that is something we are looking at.
If you add some sidewalk around the common, you wouldn't need to have a crosswalk at every exit from the common. Because you can have a safe way to walk to the next one.
Right. Good point. So we have another person concerned about the backups and the merging and the weaving. Drivers are already constantly cutting each other's off to exit from the inside lane. So let's see, then the next comment. If a rotary had only one travel lane, it would solve a lot of problems, but with parking around the circle, obviously that wouldn't work. What if the inside lane were reserved for parking only with one entrance and one exit? I think you kind of already addressed that if we went down to one lane, you anticipate there would be a much more extensive backup, particularly at Main Street. So we did initially look at that when Gordon actually started this project when I first got here, and we've been working on this for a while, and we were trying to find a way to get to one lane, to be able to provide better pedestrian, biking, everything access. And I think the hard thing too is to also remember that this is a state highway. And I mean, they say something like 80% of the cars that travel on Route 1, I don't know if this number is accurate, come through here. So it's something like 14 or 15,000 cars a day. Is that true? Come through here? So that's a pretty high number. So the hard thing is we're always going to have conflicts. No matter how much we plan, no matter what we do, we have 7 roads going off a major thoroughfare. So we're always going to have those inherent conflicts. We just have to do the best we can to minimize them. All right, we're on our last ones. Neighboring towns or area rotaries were used for comparison. Did you look at any recent changes to rotaries to sort of figure out what this would do to this one? Particularly, they mentioned the rotary in Bridgewater off 495.
We didn't really look at any other rotaries in particular. I think the common rotary is so unique. It presents a lot of challenges that can't be really seen anywhere else. So it's not your typical, nice circular roundabout. So we didn't look at any other locations specifically.
I thought this was a good comment. Why are you planning to rearrange anything traffic in downtown until the Wall Street and South Street units are finished? I think we could sort of address that. Well, first of all, Wall Street hasn't even started. It's been a couple years, so we don't want to wait. Bad traffic conditions exist today. We're trying to improve for the residents that are already here. But I did, for the, and South Street, again, that project isn't even filed, or there isn't even a project there yet. So I think maybe they're talking too about the fire station funeral home project. Can you just speak a little bit to that? Like, did you look at that, and would this affect anything there?
We did. So we looked at specifically what the fire station project was going to have as an impact on what we were proposing as part of this project. And basically the amount of volume that's generated by the firehouse project really has no significant bearing on what is or should be proposed as part of this project. So it was looked at.
Another comment, leave the comment alone. Any changes will only make it worse. If the traffic from Main Street is continuous into the rotary, this will impact traffic trying to enter South Street. Again, they're concerned, not a good solution. The inside lane becomes the outside lane to exit on the side, less confusion, lane crossing, all lanes clearly marked. It will be a what show with more accidents, and leave it alone. So these were the comments we received through this morning, through our survey making. But we do appreciate it, and we're going to try to be doing a little more interactive. We appreciate anybody who did submit comments. This is great, because I know not everybody can come up to meetings. So thank you for that, and I'll turn it back over to these guys.
Yeah.
I think we're okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've explained what we're looking to do. Right now, our focus is on that Main Street intersection. We've received quite a bit of feedback, not only tonight, but through the messages, the Survey Monkey that Paige put up. We know that we have to propose this to the Board of Selectmen for their approval to actually put this into a trial. And we know when it goes into a trial, if it goes into a trial, that we have areas of concern from this group that we know we need to look at. We are on the agenda for next Tuesday for the Board of Selectmen. I would love if there are 1 or 2 more comments, we can take those before we wrap up, to make sure that when we go next Tuesday before the board, that we are prepared to present, as we decide to move forward.
So are those arrows by Bird Street, are those going to be painted for this, or no?
We can paint them. I think they're being shown as we would black out the existing arrows that show that you can go straight through on the outside. We can paint those black, and then we can put new arrows in place. It's paint.
So the only thing with that is if you paint the arrow in front of Bird Street,
Yep.
that will mean people in Bird Street might not realize they can go to the inside lane.
Yeah, we will take a look at exactly where we paint that arrow to try to eliminate that confusion. Yes, Leah.
Just so I don't have to ask the question on Tuesday, have the schools been advised, and are they in agreement for bus stops, bus routes, every change? Has that conversation happened?
Yes, I've been in discussion with Dennis Fletcher, the bus coordinator, about this.
And can you maybe answer the age-old question and most debated thing on Foxborough discussion? Should you be exiting from the inner lane out to Central Street?
Never.
Never, right? So can we,
Never.
if it is dotted, can we paint it?
Right.
For this trial?
No.
Because the arrows go like this and like this.
Right.
So you can,
So you think you
Yeah.
can?
Yeah.
No, I think.
Yeah,
it's clear.
that's something
Dotted,
that
I
we can
see
make
how
clear.
that's confusing.
Right.
No, I think you're right. I think to Gordon's point, you have a dashed line, which means you can cross the line.
Right.
Well, that's what makes it hard coming out of South Street too,
Right,
because
'cause you don't
usually you get an opening on the outside lane and you start to go, and then the guy on the inside lane comes straight
Yeah,
across.
just like coming in from one side.
Right.
Yes.
You don't know where you're going.
Decision's been made here, don't do it. Right.
Yes,
So
Pat?
you're using barrels, or are you going to put in those markers that you can attach to the road?
We're going to use barrels, and I'm going to get lights for the barrels as well, so that they're not only reflective, but they're flashing yellow at night as well, so that it makes it clear 24 hours a day that there's something in the way.
So if things go well Tuesday, how quick can you implement it?
What we will be proposing, what we've discussed is that the following Monday, so what are we, the
When was that, the 28th?
20.
No, 21st?
First.
21st.
And what's the trial period? 3
do
months?
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
So it'd run just before Thanksgiving. We'd pull them out the week before Thanksgiving.
And if it completes at the 4 weeks,
Yep.
we're going to be going into winter, are you going to be able to, if the decision is to move forward, are you going to be able to implement it more permanently through the
No,
winter?
what we would do is, there's still quite a bit of analysis to be done after we see how the trial goes.
So you'll remove it all?
We would remove all the barrels. Yep.
After you start getting people used to it and it works, then you're going to take it all away and confuse everybody even more.
Keeping everyone on their.
Well, we need to do a final design on it to make sure that if we're putting curbing in the ground, that curbing is installed exactly where it should be.
Maybe if it's
based on that trial.
working, not removing it, so you'll confuse people?
Maybe it won't snow this winter.
Doc has a comment.
I sort of agree with Pat, and that if it's working, leave it. I mean, why take it down? Just to throw it out to the.
Well, it'll be hard to plow.
You've never driven a snow.
Right, but then how do you implement phase 2 and phase 3
No, but-
with the other 2 islands you want to add?
So I think the process, if
Pay attention.
if Main Street trial goes well, we would move forward with a permanent design at that intersection. Because that's the worst intersection on the
But before
common.
you do permanent, shouldn't you try all 3 changes you want to do
Well,
first? I'm just,
No, I think, I'm thinking along the same lines as you, Chris. I think you'd want to implement the Main Street improvements permanently and then try a phase 2 of implementing it temporary at, say, the Mechanic Street intersection.
Do it phase.
But if Main Street proves well through the test in doing it, why not then just go ahead with all of the models, computer models have been done that say that you're supporting the computer model, so then you can proceed with the others without waiting another year. I'd like to see this done before Jack and I die.
Just clarification on the temporary 4-week period.
Yes.
Would you then reverse Rock Hill back to 2 ways? It's going to be very confusing. If it works, leave it. Just leave it. Leave the barrels at Main Street entry.
Plow the snow up
Rock
in the.
Hill, I mean, it can't be 1 way for 4 weeks and 2 ways. No, people are going to be very confused.
That's a good comment.
So
We'll discuss that and,
I would
bring something when we come to the board next week. We can have that recommendation.
leave it.
And pull the barrels up the day before the snowstorm.
I'm going to go Jim and then Pat Stevens.
So if the plan is to make Rock Hill 1 way, what's the plan for the parking on Rock Hill for those weeks? And how do you, in order to access the church front
Yep.
and the theater 24/7, you have to go all the way around and then come up.
Right.
You'd be able to park on the left side still?
I would keep the parking on the same side, only you'll be coming up parking on the left.
Parking on the left.
Just because there's too much open space on the right side.
Right.
And with the construction going on, we don't want to interfere with them, so we would keep the parking on the left side coming up the hill. We're going to go Pat Stevens.
Is it possible to just put signs up, temporary traffic, something or other?
Yes, so in advance,
I mean-
yeah, in advance of the common, we have several message boards that we will put out, so people, before they get to the common, are aware that there is a new traffic pattern in place, so that they're looking for it.
And if you put up a temporary sign, it's like the MTA, everybody's taking some bus or something right now from one place to another place.
Mhm.
So if we all know that it's temporary, well, we will all know that. But if there's, 80%, 90% of the town is not here, at least they'll know it's temporary.
Right.
So when it changes back,
Right.
we should all just go back to our normal pattern.
Well, in keeping with Leah's thought of, let's answer some questions now before Tuesday night. Let's say it did work after 4 weeks, and some of us are in agreement to keep up the barrels. How long would it take to make it permanent?
You almost beyond the construction season to do it for this year.
Say that again, Bill.
You almost be beyond the construction season to do it this year, because typically in December, you can't pave or anything like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if
So you're looking at a
if the
month.
weather holds, I mean, we can do construction. Typically you don't want to open up the roadway. You don't want to be digging trenches across the road, because you never know when it might snow. You never know, you're not getting the best asphalt. I mean, there are things we could do. If it goes well, we could get curbing and set curbing. Part of that is, PAR putting together that final design for us, so we know exactly where we're setting that.
Chris, isn't that Mass Highway property though?
No.
It's all town-owned
All town.
property?
Yep. Yeah, we own from the charter school to Daniel Carpenter Street. That's ours. So if it goes well, there is some post-trial analysis that needs to be done to make sure that it's still the right thing to do. But if it's going well, then, we could, at the discretion of the board, leave those barrels in place. Yeah, if it snows, could be an issue, but we can work around
Is
things.
there any way to ask how difficult it would be just to remove them for the snowstorm and put them back? Like, if that's feasible, or is that
it's-
just a
No,
disaster for?
It can be done. It can be real done quickly with the front end of a loader.
Get a creative snowplow driver, they can take it.
For those of us doing wayfinding right now, we're actually going through an exercise to take all the sign clutter off of the common. So just a reminder to keep that in mind as we're adding additional signs to the common, and really being mindful to what's there, what's coming out, and, kind of what needs to change.
Thank you, Leah. When you exit the building, I didn't want to clutter this room with distractions, but when you exit, out in the lobby is some information on our wayfinding. And I would love you all to take a look at it, because we are going in front of the selectmen next week to propose it. We do have it on the town website, under resident. You'll see it's downtown signs and traffic plan. We have both this study and the work that PAR did, but we also have the wayfinding memo with listing all the signs to be removed, plus maps to show it. So I have some of that information out in the lobby. Love you to take a look. Feel free to email me with any questions, but thank you, Leah, for mentioning that, because we do really want to start creating a sense of place, and I think you'll start to see that the common area is going to start to be a little easier to follow, shall we say, with some of these improvements. So.
And will you be talking to the businesses to see if they've had issues of dropping? People just not accessing them because it's just too much of a hassle? Are you going to talk to the
Well,
businesses to see?
I meet with the downtown businesses every
Right.
month, so they were invited to this meeting, they were informed of all this, they've been informed of the wayfinding, so we are in communication. So yes, I would assume when there's a problem, we tend to hear about it.
I think you've done a great job with that.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
there's been a lot of
We've been
effort
trying
on that.
to really reach out, and it's hard, people aren't really paying attention anywhere right now, so it's very hard to reach more than 30 people on Facebook, so thank you, everybody, for engaging. All right, I think that's it, so take a look at the wayfinding on your way out, please.